Hello, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Perfect Practice. Today, I have somebody who I know you're going to love because she's going to help you set the stage for an amazing life, a career, but also more importantly, your retirement. This is something that comes up over and over again, especially for practitioners wondering what's after work? What happens when I'm ready to retire or throw in the towel? We do something it's really cool, which is, we consult people, which we can do for the rest of our lives, but there are important considerations when it comes to retirement. So Nancy is a principal of Envision Health Retirement, and her focus and her goal is to make sure that people are healthy, happy, and whole so they can enjoy their retirement. So Nancy, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Sachin. I'm thrilled to be here. Absolutely thrilled.
Thank you. Thank you. So what does healthy retirement mean to you? I'd love for your definition.
Yeah, so this is a question that I've grappled with for a very long time. And if you had asked me when I was in my career, I would say to you, Sachin, it is really peak performance in the mind and in the body. I was a former professional athlete, and also I was in corporate, very hard driving Fortune companies. And so there was no excuse. You were on. You were just on. There was no off. But now that I've come to this other side, I would say that that's an incorrect definition. And I would say that it's more of the mind, body, and soul. I think that that more of a holistic point of view. And it's also a very universal point of view. I think if we travel around the world, I consult globally. So I think if you think about different people in all different regions, I think if you took a really practical and very fancy and highly funded research project out there, you would find that that would be the answer.
What's the number one thing people focus on these days when it comes to retirement? I mean, I think it's mainly money, but has that focus changed over the years? Because whenever I see any conversation about retirement on television, or even if I drop into the bank, they talk about retirement. Very few people are talking about health. They're talking about what's that magic number. I'd love to know if that narrative is shifting. I mean, or is that something that you're putting out there in the world right now?
Yeah. So I've always been a disruptor of business. So here I go again. So exactly what you said, Sachin. You're so true to the money, if you will. It's about the money, and financial planning is driven by wealth creation, and so that's fabulous, and we need that. And it's also driven by companies that have programs that when you exit, you're safely held tight, and this is fabulous. But what is the void? And it's a known void in the marketplace, and that's where I saw some wiggle room to create this company. Is where's the you planning? That's what I asked. Where is the you planning? And if we really think about it, Sachin, I think you would agree, and your listeners, that you can have all the money in the world. That's great. But if you don't have your health or some other attributes around that, really not living, right? And it's a mindset, right? So it's all about that mindset of where you will be and what's important to you, what matters most. I think that that's really key. Your design, your vision for your life in your family may be different, say, from your parents or your son down the road, and maybe different from mine. We may have common elements, but it is really driven from that unique, very special person. There's only one footprint of Sachin Patel. There's only one footprint of Nancy, right? And for your audience. And so I think that's so important to listen to yourself when you're designing and envisioning what it is that you want in healthy retirement.
Yeah, one thing is definitely that number can shrink very fast if you haven't planned correctly with your health.
Yeah.
And instead of spending that money on vacations and travel and spoiling your grandkids if you have them, you end up spending it on things that you probably wouldn't have imagined having to spend it on. And as far as I can tell, the cost of healthcare keeps rising. And it's not even that, but it doesn't really, a lot of things that people are dealing with are things that they probably should have prevented or been aware of 20, 30, even 40 years prior to facing these chronic health challenges. So what's something that you found blindsides people with regards to their health in retirement age?
Okay, so I'm so happy that you asked this question. So I'll speak for myself and my colleagues, just because I do a lot of surveys with my former executives. And honestly, we didn't think about health at all. It just came along with us, right? For decades, decades and decades and decades. And then in and around retirement, all of a sudden, first-time health issues start to occur. That's what happens. And I believe it is because we've operated for so many years, like on a bullet train, just pushing, 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 pushing with no rest. Mental, physical, external, internal, just flat out. There's no other word. And when you're operating at that level, that is the norm, right? That is the norm. And so that's a surprise. Oh, my knee. Oh, my head hurts. Oh, whatever it is, first time, and it's kind of jarring. Hearing can go, a sight can go, it can be small, it can be big. And so all of a sudden realizing, wow, I really need to take care of myself. That's a huge mental shift. It's a mindset shift that without my health, I don't really have a life, let alone retirement, right?
Mm. Yeah, there was an interesting stat that I heard, and certainly feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the maybe you can just tell me what it is from
Yeah.
your data, but what's the average lifespan of somebody after they retire?
Yeah, so this is changing. So this is a really good question. So again, depending when you retire, right? So we know retirement now is what I call non-traditional. This is not my dad's retirement. In fact, when I grew up, I wanted my dad's retirement. He looked so elegant and easy for him, and that's not the way. So we know, I've worked with clients who are in their 40s. I've worked with clients in their 70s and 80s. Typically, we're all living longer, right? So the thinking in retirement, and most times when you do go to your financial planners, et cetera, they'll say, well, what do you want to do next year when you're retired? But we need to be thinking about not next year or 10 years or 20 years, but 30, 40, 50 years out. And in fact, Dr. Atria says, what are you doing in your last marginal decade, meaning the last decade where you're going to be alive? He takes it out that far. And so I've really changed my thinking to say, hey, I'm not even going to mention decades because who knows, right? We don't know. But where do you, in your mind print of what are you doing? Who are you being in that last marginal decade? So it is shifting. And also we want quality of life, Sachin, right? I mean, I cared for my parents, they were institutionalized. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that type of care, all right? So I think that it's really important to think about how you want to be, and you can start today impacting, and we know aging is a disease from David Sinclair. We know this. What can we do? And when I learned that, man, hurry up, let's go, because I want to impact my cells. And you've always said, and I have you in my pitch book, your issues are in your tissues. And so I quote you in that because it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. And to give credit where credit is due, my mentor, Joe Polish, always says that. And I think he's quoting somebody else. So I'll have to get that exact person for you. But I do believe that, yeah, our issues end up in our tissues somehow, right? Either our emotional stuff, our environmental stuff, our food stuff, the choices that we make eventually end up becoming part of us. And it's important to recognize that. In looking at your bio, I know that you were a classically trained ballerina.
Yes.
So I'd love to know how that spills into your approach working with clients right now.
Yeah, so I'm very non-traditional, Sachin. So I think that that level of creativity as a professional, and I still dance today, but more on the modern side, but I do take ballet class and surround it with a lot of other stuff. The creativity, the innovation really helped me perform as a professional. And I would always be the one on that project who nobody could solve, right? Nobody, it was a failure in the firm. And well, send it to Schwartz, she'll figure it out, you know? So that's how it was. So in terms of my clients, I don't think that there's a traditional approach. Everybody's different. So what resonates for you, Sachin, you know, might be perfect, or your audience, but then we have that individual, they're allergic. Well, we can get to this destination by many different paths. And that's the beauty of healthy retirement, is that when you move a few little pieces in your healthy retirement, some other little pieces over here move. And so there's a lot of latitude in designing something. That's what I always ask my clients. What do you envision? What do you want to be doing? How set the plan? How are we going to actualize this? And then let's go. You got to live it. You got to implement it, you know? So, and always tweaking. Well, that's life, always tweaking, right? It works today. It may not feel so great tomorrow. We're going to fix a little thing, or we want to change something, you know, it's always growing, always expanding, using the tools that we have and adding to that as well as we go along.
You know, so for someone like me, retirement feels somewhat far away.
Yes.
At 44. So what are some of the things that you would advise me to start thinking about or paying attention to, or considering, you know, that maybe I'm 40 years out from retiring. I could see myself doing this for a very long period of time.
Yes.
And I love what I do. And I'm just curious as to what your advice would be to someone who's my age.
Yeah. So I think retirement is a healthy retirement. I want to preface that. Healthy retirement is something that's bigger than you. So, and you do a lot of this now in terms of making impact, either locally or globally, wherever you are. So I think it's in an expansive phase. I think that we have to set up the right tools in terms of planning you, in terms of change of identity, because as you are defined as this global leader, you will still be defined as that, but and much more. We need to think about owning from a mindset point of view where you are in time and space, right? And then, which I know you do as well, but movement, right? So you talk about my dancing movement, contiguous movement throughout the day that is not going to break down your body, that won't cause you injury or a sports trauma or things like that, so that it will sustain your life over long term, right? Long term for quality, right? For quality.
I'm curious, what are the top regrets that people have that come to you? What is something that they wish they had done or considered, you know, let's say at my age or earlier in their lives?
Yeah, so there's several studies out. One, a Harvard study that followed classmates, and also there was a nurse in Australia that was a end caregiver. And the number one regret was not having enough money, or, you know, those typical things, the mansion on the hill and the fancy parties and the cars and all this kind of stuff. The number one regret, cross-pollinated over these two studies, was not maintaining their friends and having those relationships and building those communities, and wistful that they felt that they did not hold up that end of the friendship. And so that was a real qualifier in either the passing or the living, just a real true sorrow in their lives. Yeah.
How do you get a couple on the same page if there's discrepancies in their view of retirement and a healthy retirement, really?
Yeah. So good question. There's a lot of things that are going on here. In a couple situation, you sometimes have different timing, right? So somebody will retire before the other person. I've advised someone who, she took a large package to exit a company, but the husband had retired 20 years prior, but now was infirm. but she wanted to travel, but that's not possible with this person. So it's working on communication and speaking about what matters most for you, and how are we going to plan this so that we each realize things that are important to each of us, as well as a couple together. Sometimes those paths have to go separate, and then we have to sometimes join them depending on the particular situations. But it's very common. What people think they want in retirement isn't. Or, wow, this guy's home. Who is he? The highest divorce rate, 45%, it comes in retirement. I don't know you. Who are you? Yeah.
I did not know that.
It's a lot of friction, a lot of anger. Again, it's all this identity stuff. And I go back to that the person needs, not needs, that's not the right word, has the impetus to want to change, right? And I know you see this in your practice all the time, but it's there for the taking if you want it that much to change. Yeah.
You know, when it comes to retirement and healthy retirement, I'm curious as to who your ideal client is, because I would imagine there's a certain type of person that is seeking, you know, this level of personal growth that's required to retire healthy. Who's your ideal client, and who's somebody that may not be your ideal client?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So I would say in and around retirement. So either they're still operating, but they see the window. So that means either they're in a merger or acquisition, they're not the dominant company acquiring. So it's duplication of role. They know they're exiting. Or perhaps they're doing, they're carving out something. It's around the world. They don't want to go to that place or whatever it is. So they know it's imminent. And or it's directed by the company, you know, age-wise, right? So this gentleman that I worked with, when I took him on, he said, Nance, it's either going to be in the next 3 months or the next 6 months, because he had a huge bonus he was waiting for in 2023. So they were able to work out the mechanics. So it happened in 2022. And then, so that's one set, right? Very, very close to retirement. We see the window. Why? Because you know it's coming, right? You know it's coming. And the other is the person who has retired, but they're feeling like I don't like this, or I feel there's something more, but what is it? I feel I'm missing something, or I'm really unhappy and miserable. And we all know, usually, typically the first couple of years, people will travel. And it's not that the money runs out. It's rarely that. It's that person saying, man, I don't feel fulfilled. I got to go do something. What is it? Now, statistically, post-COVID and pandemic, many retirees are going back to work, not the heavy hitting role. Some, I mean, some, if they're, you know, ridiculously addicted to being a CEO or something like that, they're going to go do that again, or they have a great idea or something like that, or they want to be an investor, but it's not at the pressure level that they typically sustain for the last 40 or 50 years of their lives. It's something that they really feel they're really contributing to society as a whole, and you know, building something good. You know, there's a value there.
Yeah, you know, you've kind of uniquely positioned yourself with the different trainings and background that you have. So you've got training in heart math, you're training from the Health Coach Institute. You're part of our mentorship as well.
Yes,
So
which I love. Yeah.
Thank you. I love this, this, you know, this desire for you to continue to grow yourself. I'd love to know how that spills into your interactions with your clients. Are you giving them and guidance with regards to their health as well as their financial prosperity as well? I'd love to know how that works.
Yeah. So, so when I was retiring, this is how this sort of germinated in my brain. You know, I took a lot of retirement courses, but I felt that it was very superficial, and it was all testing. And they created algorithms, and Sachin, you're going to do this, Nancy, you're going to do this, the audience will do this. And I thought, man, I'm not a button on a piece of paper. I think there's a little bit more to hear. And then I started to be very interested in science and technology, which is really what I love to do. And then I thought, why not marry the two, right? Why not marry the two? And so that's how I came to that realization of putting those two together. And I do a little bit of both. As far as it relates to the financial services, the actual investing in the world is way too complicated. I would not want the fiduciary responsibility. You need a house. You really need a house. And so I've built a Rolodex of referrals, same as with accounting and lawyers, et cetera. But my job is to refer, to make sure that you build a good financial team around you. I can't possibly offer the type of services that you would be inside. Now, am I capable? Because I've done it for myself. Yes, but I think the client deserves better in a house today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for you to share maybe a transformational story that you've been able to take a client through.
Oh gosh, Sachin. Okay, well, let's take this last guy that I just completed, and a high level of stress. He was 68, and when we were going through this transformation, he said, "Nance, I wish I had retired earlier." He was seeing a way to come forward. He was absolutely certain, "Nance, I'm going to be how I am," when I was talking to him about his identity, "how I am now, and then I'll be the same in retirement." And I just smiled. Sometimes those questions you got to let go for a little bit. He was very fearful of becoming lazy and unproductive. That was his number two. That's one of the global concerns in and around retirement, the number two, excluding wealth. And the other one is physically and mentally inactive, right? And so he had both of those. And so we worked on getting him healthier. He had no time to do any sort of exercise, but he was a willing participant. He ate out at all these fast food places. His wife had passed, and it was just easier because he was exhausted to just go to these fast food places than buy food. So really relearning a lot of the skills that we know, we just don't have time to do. We look for the short paths, but really they're not the short paths. They're a short cut to a divergence of an accident off the road, and we have to get them back onto the road to see that there's better ways, right? So that's that. He's becoming more involved in his family and building his relationship with his son, which is so beautiful to see because he has the time, right? Because he has the time, and building out his relationships overall and community. So, he also said something really interesting. He said, Nance, having this program, I was able to see that this is a lot of behavioral things that go into play for healthy retirement, and everything is interwoven. And I love that. I thought that was very, it's so true. Better sleep, all the things that we talk about will help his quality of life for many years down the road.
So important, so vitally important. And what's a message that you would have when you're working with somebody? What's a message that you wish somebody had told them, let's say 20, 30 years ago, or maybe even their parents had told them? I know you said that one of the biggest regrets is not maintaining relationships, but what's a piece of advice that if you could whisper into their ear while they're sleeping that they would listen to, what would that be?
So I really feel it is to, one, prioritize yourself, which is a mindset, mind, body, and soul. And in that component, to value your health. You only have one health, and to start paying attention to that very early on. And, you know, Sachin, I really felt that I was healthy when I retired, but I was so far from it, right? So far from it. And so it's a discovery process for each person. And I just encourage your audience to offer that for their clients, that health is just, it's very tenuous, you know, and it can be so good for so long, right? So we know it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, the people listening to this, many of them are health practitioners or coaches, and they may be starting their business or, you know, getting their business off the ground or scaling it in some way. You know, we as practitioners don't have like 401ks or retirement plans many times. So we are our own retirement fund, right?
Yes,
So to
yeah.
speak, which can be a good or bad thing if we don't have the right people helping us along the way. It could be a bad thing, but if we do have the right people like yourself, it could be a great thing. What are some of the challenges you see in healthcare practitioners, like specifically, you know, doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths? If you have any experience working with them, what are some things that come up for them? Because I would imagine that their challenges may be a little bit different than a CEO who may not have that same level of health awareness versus a practitioner. I'm curious if there's a difference you've been able to identify.
So, you know, the cobbler never has any shoes. It's the same for healthcare practitioners. In my prior life, I would say that they're just amazing geniuses. They're frontier looking. They are beloved by their clients, but they can't run a business, and it's not what they should be doing. And similarly, they need a consultant like myself to say, hey, what have you done today for you and your health? Yeah. So they're so close to it. They're probably allergic to even think about it when they get home for themselves, you know, but I really offer, you know, one small little tidbit of something that they could do. You know, these guys, they work 24/7. I mean, it's insane, you know, the hours and whatever, but even, you know, taking moments, you know, within the day to find supportive modalities that they could work on. Yeah.
Yeah. Take a few deep breaths, go for a walk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. The simple stuff.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love it.
The simple
I,
stuff.
and I know you're wearing an Aura ring.
Yes.
So I'm curious if that's something that you recommend to your clients, or another other tools to help them, you know, kind of get a baseline and some way of tracking their progress when it comes to their health.
Right. So wearables are a big thing, I believe, and most of my clients can afford them. And also they're really data driven, right? Show me the result. What are you talking about? No, I don't do that. Well, okay. So we do, right? So being able to track it and to understand why this is happening, I think it's the science behind it. Now, I'm Sachin, I am not a science practitioner. I'm just a common sense girl from New England. But I think if you can give that value to the client, I think it's really important. And for instance, many of my clients also use the Apple Watch because it's more gamified a little more gamified.
Right.
And so they love that. Hey, I've gotten, and I think Aura just came out with crowns. I think I got a few 100 crowns last month or something. I don't know, but it was kind of fun, right? So they're gamifying all of this so that, Sachin, what was your crown score? You know, it's fun. It's fun to do this, but at the same time, we're getting valuable information from the consumer side, right? From the consumer side, but that it ultimately, at the end of the day, will give an awareness to how are you, the entity of that human, how are you performing?
Yeah, it's like a total portfolio, right? So not just looking
Yes.
at the bank statements and retirement accounts, but looking at what's happening in your body right now or last
Right.
night, and the decisions that you're making and the choices that you're making. I would imagine, just like as you said, your audience is very driven by metrics, right? And they
Yeah.
want to know that what you're doing and recommend what they're doing and what you're recommending is working for them. So
Exactly.
wearables can be a great way for people to do that. Are there any other wearables that you recommend that you found have been helpful, or is Aura the one that you're mainly using?
Aura is really, because it's very commercialized, I know one of my clients had a Fitbit, but primarily I recommend Aura. It's simply, I'm just very careful because I'm not that geeky scientist person. I'm that business person. So that piece I can understand. And the Apple Watch, obviously, it's more consumer driven, but I know that there's so many things that can be very supportive for people that you talk about in your mentorship, as your global mentorship. Yeah.
Awesome. Have you ever considered having them wear a continuous glucose monitor? Has that ever come up in conversation?
I have talked about levels, definitely, but I have not had any takers.
That, I found that to be a very powerful tool because people can see in real time how their food and their stress and
Yes.
their exercise affects their blood sugar. And, as you know, and as many people listening to this probably know, that's probably one of the main things, that if we can stabilize blood sugar,
Yes.
everything else, it's like one of the lead dominoes that allows a lot of other things to fall into place, including our sleep, including our mood, and our body composition and things like that. I love that you're bringing this technology into your practice. And as a
Mm.
heart math practitioner, is this something that you incorporate as well? Are you using your heart math techniques with them?
Absolutely, for stress release, So, most people will say, oh, I just deal with it. But I'm like, whoa, hang on, you're so wound tight, you're about to launch to Mars. But they don't see that, because this stress level, and I still fight with this myself, that it's so ingrained that it becomes a way of living. This is just the way it is. This is the way how I am at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, how I am at midnight, how I am in the middle of this very difficult project. And so we become acclimatized to, oh, this is just the way it is, but it's not,
Hmm.
So it's modulating those stressors, modulating those, and recognizing in yourself, because everybody's different, what are your triggers? I talk about that a lot. What sets you off?
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, let's review the situation here, so yeah.
Hmm. Another thing that comes up for me as we're having this conversation is, for some people who may not have financial stability or security, or maybe they're just starting their
Yes.
business or their practice out, they might
Yes.
be thinking, oh, like when I have money, all my problems go away and my stress goes away. And clearly it may not, right? Because you're working with people who are quite affluent, or, money should not be the thing that is probably not the thing that's keeping them up at night. So what does keep people up at night? What are the stressors of people who don't have financial stressors as part of their day-to-day thought process? What are they thinking about? What is the thing that's, driving them crazy, if you will?
Yeah. Typically it's the family structure. So that can be very discombobulated, to say the
Mm.
least. It can be cat and dog fight with, my neighbor, Mrs. Jones, has this, but I only have that, but she has another shiny new object that I want. It's this competition that's kind of irrelevant.
Mm.
Sometimes it's your husband does this, but my husband does that, but he's bigger, so therefore, we have wider wingspan, or whatever it is. So it's not real world problems, but it can become very quickly real world problems. Look at the stock market that just happened, the cutting down, not in touch with really reality. We're kind of living sometimes in a lovely lifestyle, but it's not in touch with really what is happening in the world. There's so many, it's just different. They just have different problems. They're the same and intense, just at a different scale, and
Mm.
for different problems, right? For different problems. The other thing that's very tragic is oftentimes in families that are, where the family, the parents, grandparents have been extremely successful, having those children that don't perform at that level.
Hmm.
Heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And because there's a lot of money, drugs, all these things, there's access to things that most people, and to good things, but also access to things that perhaps one should keep driving.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who does have, extraordinary wealth,
Mm,
and they encounter a situation like this where their children don't have to think about money?
yeah.
That's not top of mind awareness for them.
Mm,
How would you, maybe in hindsight for these people, manage that from the very beginning? So, I grew up, in a very simple home, a very modest home. Our parents worked their butts off. There
right.
was always food on the table. So I can't cry that sob story that I ate out of a dumpster or anything like that. But, I know what it's like to watch your parents work really hard, and they instill that work
Yes.
ethic in me.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing the fruits of their labor and their efforts in myself. And so I'm in a position where, thankfully, with God's grace and blessing, that my son may not have to think about money.
Mhm.
But we want to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that he values it, and
Mhm.
that he honors it, and he treats it with respect, and he doesn't get into situations like this. So what advice would you give to somebody to help that trailing generation manage the resources and emotions as well as they can?
Yeah. So this is such an excellent question. I am not a mother, purposefully. So I'm the least likely person to give advice, but I will try. So I think two things. One, allow your child to get out in the real world,
Mm,
volunteer, run a race, provide toys for other children, do a Christmas drive, a Thanksgiving drive here in the States, you know, provide for others, see how others live. It's eye-opening. And then the other thing I would do is teach them the value of money. And that's what my dad did. And I was always so grateful. I can remember as a little child going down to the bank. Sachin, I couldn't reach the top teller. I couldn't reach up there. I had to get lifted up. And I brought my little piggy bank. And dad said, okay, we're going to count the pennies and we're going to open. And the teller thought we were clearly from Mars. But that taught me the value of money. Every single penny mattered. And so to spend very carefully, to think about it. Just don't spend because your friend bought this. You don't need necessarily that. So the materialistic piece of it or the competition piece of it, but that your purchases matter for you and your
mm.
family. That's just personally what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, we put our little guy Devin to work. So
I know
he's
you
got to
do.
he's got to earn his keep, if you will. And we try not to spoil him as much as it's as tempting as it can be.
Yeah,
And that's great advice. So thank you for that.
sure. Anytime.
So Nancy, how can people learn more about your work and get in contact with you if they're interested in a healthy, fulfilling retirement?
Thank you, Sachin. So I think the easiest place would be my website, which is envisionhealthyretirement.com. And I'll say that one more time, envisionhealthyretirement.com. And there you can schedule a complimentary discovery call. I do not do sales. This is a referral-based business only. So please don't feel that you're going to be sold. I don't do that. I don't like that myself. And then also on the website, there is a sleep PDF, which we're changing seasons right now. So this could be maybe helpful to someone you know or yourself. So please download that as well. So any way that I can add value, I'm a big value adder. I think that's so important. Please reach out. I would love to have a conversation.
Amazing. Thank you for such wisdom and guidance and advice. I'm so excited that I get to work with you on a regular basis, and you bring such joy and enlightenment to our community. So thank you for being such a great
Thank
member
you,
of it.
Sachin.
And here's to your continued growth and success and health.
Here's to all of our growth and success and health. Absolutely. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you. It's
Thrilled.
my absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.